Welcome everyone to the Races War and Everything. We're on episode 237, and today you are just joined by myself and Nolsey. How are you braving the heat, Nolsey?
Terribly at work. I'm lucky that my house has got a relatively small enough footprint that it's not terribly expensive to cool it.
Oh god, it's we're doing this at 4:30 and it's still like 37 degrees.
Fuck.
It's bloody hot today. Anyway, well, what a surprise that we're going to kick off today's episode talking about anti-Semitism and the Israel-Gaza situation. Maybe you've heard about what were at first called killer doctors, and then we found out they were actually nurses. And this has been global news, actually. I've seen international outlets cover this about these two nurses who were using, I think it was called Chat Rouletka. It's one of those like random video chat services where you just get
not just chat roulette. I remember that as a teenager, being exposed to fucking random dudes' dicks.
Well, yeah, that's what I heard. Like, that's what a lot of guys do. And the reason I know that is because of those Handsome Truth videos. Because he does that. He uses one of those chat app things, whatever they are, to troll people. And I remember he had this black woman on who said that guys just kept showing their dicks on it. So yeah, if you're a parent, don't let your kids use one of those fucking services.
If you're a parent, don't let your kids use the fucking internet.
Well, yeah, that's true.
God fucking damn it! How much irreparable damage has been done to us as a generation because of the fucking internet, man? I remember being 12 years old and watching the cartel like fucking hook a dude up to an IV full of morphine and cut his face off.
Well, that's why I'm actually somewhat grateful. In my household, we did not have the internet till I was 16 years old. Because my parents are weird, like pseudo-Luddites. We never had a microwave either. So it took like years of me begging my parents to get us a computer and an internet connection. Finally got it at the age of 16. But I think, with all that I know now, that I was probably better off for that. I probably had less of a warped childhood.
Yeah, but yeah, no, just they were using one of these chat things and they said some naughty stuff. Some very obviously edgy shit.
Like, all right, I mean, isn't that the most obvious thing to say about this? That what they were saying was hyperbole, it was gusto, it was obviously not meant to be taken seriously. No one would seriously confess on a chat service to murdering Israeli patients in a hospital. Okay, it just wouldn't fucking happen. They would not be that. I mean, what they did was stupid, of course, considering it's gone public and everything. But I mean, if you had actually done something like that, like refused a patient treatment, or even if you'd killed them or something, that would be the last thing you would utter publicly. And me saying that, apparently that puts me in like the same camp as Hizbut Tahrir, because there was like some. If you read The Australian today, this is Monday, 17th of Feb, they were talking about how there was this letter put out. Like, it still condemned the nurses, right? But it said that, like, this was all going on weaponized anti-Semitism and manufactured outrage. Because, I mean, it's been going for this story happened actually nearly a week ago now, and it's still very prominent in the headlines. Like I just said, in The Australian. Like, I think I caught two headlines in The Australian today when I checked the app, and they were both still on these nurses. So, all right, what they said was, that line between edgy and Fed post, okay, fine. They were there. They were on it. But do we really need a whole week of headline news on it about, a couple of idiot Muslims just mouthing off?
Well, again, we all know why. I don't think we can actually even legally say why now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, sorry.
That's
I forgot to I didn't finish that point. The joint letter was put out by moderate Muslim groups. This is according to the Australian, but it was also like signed by Hizb ut-Tahrir, which of course is considered an extremist group, and it is banned in many countries around the world. For some reason, not banned in Australia yet. I definitely suspect that will happen soon, especially given what's just happened. But no, even like Fatima Payment came out and said what we just said, which was like, okay, this was like, edgelord stuff that went a bit far, but aren't we taking it too far with all of this saturation coverage?
Well, again, it was super big on fucking Twitter, man. I saw at least, a representative from nearly every single goddamn synagogue over here complaining and crying, saying like, oh, look what we're being exposed to. You had like left-leaning people in the Jewish community say like, oh, we need to understand that like this is just a stock standard anti-Zionist, talking points. It is that like, they scream genocide while actually advocating for murder and death and blah, 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 and reprisal. And then the right-wing one saying like, the Jewish community, and not saying like Australia as a whole, but it's just the Jewish community shouldn't have to be exposed to this.
But the Jewish community are the ones who exposed it, though. It was done by an Israeli influencer who has since released the video in full, completely unedited. So I don't get that logic at all. Right? They were the one who brought visibility to this. Now, the other thing, I think maybe like one of the reactions to this is like, oh no, how could like just these ordinary nurses at a local hospital, say something that extreme? And, this is where I will agree that, the problem is basically the Muslim community generally. And what I mean is like, we always draw these distinctions between the moderate Muslim and the extremist Muslim, as if the extremist Muslim, takes like 0.5% of the population and all the rest are moderates, apparently. It's definitely true that, that's just not true. You look at many polls of just Muslims from around the world, the ones who live in the Middle East and in the West, and, they will very often speak favorably about terror attacks, about Osama bin Laden, about killing innocent Westerners in the name of Islam. It's actually pretty common in the Arab Muslim community.
I remember this saying from the early aughts, and it's like, oh, the problem with fundamentalist, Muslims is fundamentalist Islamists is the fundamentals of Islam. It's just like, yeah, like the shit like this is not, you're not fucking going out to like, the Greek hills to find some like uber sect of Christian Orthodox people who believe in like murdering to fucking grant the end times or some shit like that. This is garden variety shit. Yeah,
and I mean, the Quran says that this is the last word that God will ever have, saying like that's it, it's complete. Christians now will talk about, another second coming of Christ and that kind of thing. But you see, with the Bible, you've got wiggle room to say that like the New Testament overrides the Old Testament. So therefore, all of the barbarous stuff that you can get and all the acts you can get stoned to death for in the Old Testament, well, they're just sort of null and void. You can't do that with the Quran. Because the Quran says, like, no, just go out, kill the infidel, and that's it. There's not really any nuance to that.
Yeah, it's like, is there a lot of violence in the Bible and the New Testament? Oh, fuck. Yes, there is. Is there calls to violence? Yeah, some of them more veiled than others. Now, is there actually details on how to commit like actual fucking war crimes in the Bible? Like detailed saying about what you should be doing in this situation? No. Is there in the Quran? Yes. Granted, talking points from the early aughts, man, like fucking completely another old hack, but
yeah,
nothing ever dies. Nothing ever dies in this scene.
I was about to say, like, I was sort of into the counter jihad stuff for a while. I think
everyone was.
Yeah, and I mean it's a very common pipeline for people to do. I mean, a lot of Australian nationalists, started off basically being um, anti-Muslim immigration. Like a Tommy
The
Robinson type. That they
Yeah,
were kind of simple.
the entire like ethno-nationalist scene you see in Australia, the white nationalist scene you see in Australia, all of that stuff, all of the movements, it doesn't matter what fucking set of alphabet letters they use, they all have some previous ancestor in the UPF.
Yeah, and I mean, just remember how like Blair Cottrell and Neil Erickson first kind of came to public awareness when they did that mock beheading. Do you remember
Mm,
that? And
yeah,
now, well, I don't know about Erickson, but Cottrell certainly has moved on to have much more nuanced and sophisticated views since then, rather than just being Muslims out, and that's about it. So yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying I'm a counter jihadist or something, because when you do that, you've got to defend the state of Israel. And basically, you say the only reason why you don't want Muslims in the West is so that they don't target Jews in anti Semitic attacks. That's not what I'm
mm,
doing. But I am saying, though, that like this happened in Bankstown, okay? And like a part of me wants to say, this is not Australian. This did not happen in Australia. This happened in Bankstown, which is a province of Lebanon. Okay, because it's just wall to wall
yes,
fucking Lebs in Bankstown. Okay, so it's like I want to bring light to the fact that some of our suburbs have just been completely taken over by Arabs and Muslims, to the point they're just not recognizably Australian at any level.
yeah. Oh well,
But yeah, look,
oh
it's
well.
definitely not the last we've heard about this. And yeah, I'm thinking now that this will sort of provide the catalyst for the government finally banning or designating Hizb ut-Tahrir to be a terrorist organization. Uh, I think they had that in the works anyway, but it'll probably just be sped up now. Um,
Again, I think they probably got away with it just because they haven't really done anything or been all that proud of the surface here. But right now they've managed to fucking step foot right in the dog shit of this whole issue.
well, I mean, yeah, so they've been sacked. They'll never work in New South Wales Health again. In fact, I think both of them would have a very hard job uh, trying to find employment anywhere at the moment, considering the blanket coverage on them. Everyone knows what they look like. Everyone knows their names. One of them, like, apparently was like rushed to hospital or something. I think the bloke was,
Oh God.
and there were concerns for his welfare, which might have meant a suicide attempt or something. I don't know, but
I'll fucking
yeah,
see.
I'd hate to be
I'll
them at the
fucking
moment.
see.
All right. So anyway, we do have other anti-Semitism news for you. Regarding universities, which is definitely another target of all these
Oh, hotbed.
accusations. So the backbencher Josh Burns, he's a Labor MP who's Jewish. You might remember uh, his office was attacked a while ago. He's
He was one of the
pushing
big commentators. Yeah.
for the complaints system at universities to be overhauled, and really quickly, because university, like I think for most people, starts next week.
Yep.
So they've got to, obviously, if they're still planning to go ahead with this, they've got to do it very quickly. But basically, they want the complaints process to be simplified so that it is easier to report acts of brazen anti Semitism. And that includes against staff who they, think might be, uh, teaching anti-Israel or anti-Zionist propaganda in their classes. And yeah, you're going to get a lot of that.
An SBS play-by-play of the last year would be anti-Zionist propaganda.
It would be. Look, I mean, anything that is critical to the state of Israel, basically, is considered to be anti-Zionist or anti-Jewish. And that's, what this effort broadly is about, that is just kind of neutering all criticism of Israel and Jews on Australian campuses. So Burns is also pushing for each university to have a shared definition of anti-Semitism. Now, as far as I know, that does not mean the IHR definition of anti-Semitism.
I watch it become it.
Yeah. However, if Josh Burns is pushing for that, you can only imagine it'll be pretty damn close to it. Most Australian universities have refused to adopt the IHR definition because it would be an enormous attack on academic freedom if they did so. We've gone through all the points on previous shows, so we won't do it again. But if I were to sum it up, basically you cannot criticize Jews or Israel in basically any fashion at all. If you do, you're guilty of anti-Semitism. And if a university adopted that as its definition, that means that you will be up for academic or possibly even legal penalties for, say, having written such material in one of your assignments. You were going to say?
No, I was going to say, real or imagined, man. Like, fucking Jesus Christ. When that thing first came out, it was just like, holy fucking shit. There is no win case. There is no loophole. This is a catch-all. This is bullshit.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll look further to that. This, by the way, is the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights. They're only concerned about one group at the moment, though, when it comes to human rights. That is being chaired by Josh Burns. They've also called on universities to have new regulations that would make it easier for them to sack staff for also propagating anti-Semitic material. But again, you've got to ask, what exactly does he mean by that? Like a class that, say, criticizes Israel as an ethnocracy or a racist ethno-state or something. I certainly remember when I was in uni, I read in readers' descriptions of Israel as such. Does that mean then that academic who published that or assigned it as a reading could then just be sacked? I would say, yeah. That's what he would be pushing for. And, sorry. I do actually have, I didn't see this line here, but the definition of anti-Semitism that Josh Burns would want the universities to adopt should align closely with the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, the IHRA definition. So he may not be calling for it to the letter, but he wants something pretty close so that he can sack staff and, fail students for writing anti-Israel assignments, essentially.
Which, again, I'm not even sure what class. We're recording this episode, right? There's been some new fucking hate speech laws put through. We're not even what the fuck we can say.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've been a bit more careful now, of course. And what's going to happen to your live show, Nolsey? Is that basically dead now because of this?
I'm thinking, yeah, fuck. I don't think we could get away with a live show.
No. I like to play drops on the live show. And I also like being able to relax a bit and not have to worry about, having to be careful about my language and that kind of thing. Just can't do that now.
Well. Shit.
Okay. Now, the other education reforms from the Albanese government, this included a higher education code bill that basically it's sort of like the universities having their own criminal code that includes offences like sexual harassment, sexual violence, stuff like that. The coalition was seeking to amend that bill so that it would include anti-Semitism as well. Now, I don't think, when I read this article, there was nothing in it about applying that to people of other races or ethnic groups. the coalition just wants to zoom in on Jews to make that part of the university code. Oh, God. Okay, so look, we did mention last week that New South Wales is introducing state version of these hate speech laws. They're doubling up. I'm sure Victoria will very soon as well. But anyway, what are these? We didn't really go through the changes last week for the New South Wales legislation, so I'll run through a little bit of that now. So the bill is aimed at protecting places of worship and further criminalising Nazi symbols. Now remember, they're already illegal at the federal level, as are Roman salutes and other forms of speech.
Look, I can tell you what they're really referencing there. They want, and that state security agent who fucking pointed out, or like, what was it? State security officer, some officer of some kind, who pointed at Joel Davis like, yo, you wear a Nazi insignia, arrest him. They really want the EAM flag to be registered as a hate symbol.
Because, well, the other day they were out training, and that was actually, it was headline news on Channel 9, right? All they were doing was training, and they did it at a park. That was it. And they were displaying the NSN symbol, and they were fuming over that, because the cops couldn't arrest them for it, because that has not been designated as a Nazi symbol.
And then obviously Josh Byrne comes out and says, well, maybe we should just fucking literally openly says hey, if we just need to fucking indiscriminately ban a whole bunch of shit, X, Y, and Z, then, we just need to do that. So be it. These people can't be allowed to be around.
Yeah, well, that's what him and, assuming you saw the same report I did, Devere Abramovich was in it as well. And he was saying that simply the presence of the NSN or the EAM should be illegal. So he just says they shouldn't even be allowed to go to the park and train. I mean, my God. Anyway. And even tonight, there's some fucking Four Corners thing on about radicalized youth, and they're focusing on a 16-year-old who joined the NSN.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It's been going on the socials today.
Did you see the one fucking I'm not going to say the word, but you know the word that I'm going to be using, who's lamenting that his sister got impregnated by one of the guys over there.
Oh, I did see the guy from Queensland.
Yeah. If you pull up the story, you might recognize the guy. I do.
And the two brothers were total soy boys.
Yes.
That is hilarious. And their sister has been impregnated by one of our guys.
Yeah.
So poetic.
Imagine that bit of pill to swallow, man. Good guy. I remember him back in the day, man. Holy shit. No,
Good on him. Bloody good on him.
Yeah, I just love Nathan Swindon on that's the name he goes by. I'm not fucking saying his government name. Just on Twitter posting anyone who's lamenting that article is I feel like my sister's been dragged into another world, and it's just Nathan Swindon posting the photo of them doing the little maypole thing. He's yeah, probably for the better. Look at these fucking turds.
Yeah. That moment when the sister is more based than the brothers. So anyway, the laws in New South Wales. So intentionally blocking, impeding or hindering and harassing, intimidating or threatening a person accessing a place of worship will be a criminal offence, and that will attract up to 2 years in jail. Now, here's where the laws go further than the federal laws. If you display a Nazi symbol near a synagogue or a Jewish museum or a Jewish school, that would attract a punishment of up to 2 years in jail, which is double the existing maximum. So see, we've got this competition now between the state and federal governments to see who can pass the more draconian hate speech laws to best pander to the Jewish lobby.
Again, I think I was saying to some Americans about this. We live in an era of Australia where the biggest driving political force is Jewish hysteria.
So, and a court will also be free to impose a harsher sentence for general offences where conduct was partially or wholly driven by hate. So, and I don't imagine it would be hard to prove that.
No, unfortunately.
All right. Okay, so Josh Frydenberg and what's this woman's name? Alana Rubin. They have launched what's called the DOR Foundation, DOR. It's a non-profit, non-partisan organisation to work directly with organisations across Australia to better understand what anti-Semitism is and how to build tolerance, understanding, and social cohesion.
I'm looking at their staff, and holy shit, that's a lot of Indians.
You just Googled them, did you? I only just read the article. Oh, God. Yeah, that makes sense that I have a lot of Indians. Anyway, look, this is obviously just another propaganda centre. It sounds like its aim is to kind of go for the more general community, though, rather than, preach to the Jewish population, which, would just be preaching to the choir. Now, if it's anything to go by, I remember when there was do you remember those anti-Semitic school incidents that happened a few years ago where a Muslim got a Jew to kiss his feet?
Yep.
I don't know if you remember that. And again, that was just all Muslims who did it. And it was Muslim students in Melbourne schools. Well, when those were happening, Josh Frydenberg, because he was the treasurer back then, he said that they needed to have compulsory Holocaust education in Victorian schools. And then a month later, Dan Andrews said, all right, and they introduced it. And at the time, I was saying that would be counterproductive, because imagine what happens when you make a bunch of Arab Muslims, you force them to sit through a class on the Holocaust. Do you really think that's going to be a method of, de-radicalizing them or making them more tolerant or strengthening social cohesion? They will sit through that class and laugh, just like we would,
sure.
poking holes in it. They often talk about how de-radicalization programs are ineffective. And it's well, of course. The people that you're trying to deprogram or reprogram, they don't consider themselves to be radical. They actually consider their views to be quite rational. So if this is anything like Josh Frydenberg's previous efforts, this is just going to a whole lot of nothing.
Yes. Again, maybe in America, where America is kind of there's no immediate ethnic interest for or against the Holocaust. Obviously, that's because your average person doesn't engage with the Holocaust as in the Jewish erasure, which is the Holocaust didn't happen, and they're lying, which is terrible. The Holocaust did happen, and they're negatively affecting the people who liberated them. Blah blah blah. So in America, I can see Holocaust class working. I can't see a Holocaust class working with anything outside of the most bluest blooded of Anglos here in this country.
Yeah,
I don't think Italians would fucking take nice to it. I don't think Greeks would take nice to it. I don't even think the Irish would even take nice to it.
No. I realized there was something I missed out last week when I was talking about, I think her name is Melanie Phillips. She was this woman talking about global anti-Semitism and stuff, but she actually said recently that Ireland does not have the right to statehood. She pointed to the fact that the Irish Free State wasn't founded until I can't remember now, but 1940 or something. And she basically said, Britain should recolonize Ireland for that purpose. The only reason she's saying that, though, is because she hates the Irish because of the pro-Palestine stance that they have. That's it. That's the only reason why she go and say something like that. So, yeah, strategically, these more right-wing Jews will latch on to causes like that, and they'll be like very pro-Brexit and all that kind of thing. Anyway, that was a tangent. Right. So, the city of Sydney, talking about the council here, obviously in Sydney, at their June 2024 meeting, this was a Greens-led motion. So this was to scrap contracts that the city of Sydney had with Israeli-linked companies. That includes Hewlett-Packard. Now, this has been criticized by Jewish groups as being BDS light, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And I guess it is. I mean, that's calling for essentially a boycott of Israeli goods when it comes to the council's expenses. So, yeah, I'd say you could call it that. But again, this is causing the Greens to fall under attack from supposedly supporting anti-Semitism. And still the Greens, last story on anti-Semitism. Julie and Lisa from the coalition, who I think is back on the front bench now, he asked Anthony Albanese if Labor would be putting the Greens last on their how to vote cards in this election. Albanese refused to answer that question. Now, anyone who's seen the Labor how to vote card before, usually the Greens are near the top. Sometimes they're just given second preference, Labor 1, Greens 2. And also, there was a time where this was completely reversed. It used to be a case of Labor asking the Liberals, will you put One Nation last? And most of the time, the coalition gave in, by the way. They did put them last. They gave in to that pressure. This is going all the way back to 1998 under John Howard. Now, One Nation are nothing more than lukewarm populism. And, they're given a lot of airtime on Sky News and stuff. They're just not considered to be the nationalist party that they once were, and rightly so. So no one really cares about that. Instead, we've got the Greens in the spotlight for apparently being anti-Semitic. And the way Julie and Lisa phrased the question was, would you put the racist anti-Semitic party last?
Nope.
I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Racist anti-Semitic party.
Remember this. Some of the polls suggest that we could be going into a minority government. If that were to happen, Labor would have to cobble together a loose coalition, and that would have to include Greens. That would be that much harder for them if they were to say put them last on the how to vote cards. So
if that actually happens, not that it'll change much functionally about how the government operates, because we all kind of know on some level that it's just a big adult puppet show. At least we'll see some interesting shit.
Yeah, I mean, the 2010 Parliament was quite entertaining, actually, back in the day, where Julia Gillard was just barely clinging on, and Abbott was doing everything he possibly could to wrest it away from them. We could end up in another situation like that, and that could also involve a lot of Teals and even Muslim independence. Okay, let's move on to immigration. So we have just struck a deal with the Nauru government. They have agreed to resettle members of the NZYQ cohort. So
what?
That was the group of that was the name of the court decision You know how they do
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but no, I'm going to explain what it is. It's when the High Court decided in 2023 that indefinite detention in Australia was actually illegal. So, that set a lot of illegal immigrants free. A lot of them had committed very serious offences, and that was the reason why they were still in detention. It was also the reason why, like, their home country refused to take them in. Like, one was a child rapist, for example, from Myanmar. But now we've reached an agreement, as we very often do with our local island neighbours, to dump them all there, to resettle them there. Now, you can absolutely bet your left nut that there has been a cost to this. The Australian government has said that a cost has been paid. We don't know how much that is, but I assume it's very generous, just like when we dump money on PNG and whatever. Now, look, I will say though that this is like one of the, perhaps the only form of non-white foreign aid that I support. If it's about dumping refugees that we don't want here, then fine. We don't want them here.
Yeah. Okay. I'll pay you to take these fucking rapists off my hand.
Yes. And Nauru is already full of subhumans anyway, so it won't exactly make a big difference. So yeah, offload them. One more story on immigration, and that is, do you remember Direction 99? This was kind of all going on at the same time. Oh God, I forget what the immigration minister's name was at that point. I don't know how I'm forgetting that, because he was just being hammered by the coalition day after day after day. But anyway, Direction 99, this is where if someone's visa was cancelled, say due to character concerns, like they had committed a very serious crime or something like that, if they were to bring that to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, they would have to consider that person's ties to the country. For example, if they had a job here, if they had family here, if they had friends here. And that resulted in a lot of these cancelled visas being reinstated. And that meant a shitload of violent people being allowed to stay in the country. So
it's terrible. It's just terrible.
We've got one guy. He is a New Zealand-born criminal. I'm pretty sure he's a Maori. He was one of those people who had it cancelled, but then had it reinstated. But now they're trying to cancel it again. Because in the case of this guy, he's had, in Australia anyway, 35 convictions, most of which is to do with domestic disputes, with his family, but also his neighbours. Apparently this guy just terrorizes everyone around him. But he's saying that the government made an error of law in cancelling his visa. And apparently he is the last of this Direction 99 cohort that we've got to deal with. I just can't believe we deal with these people in the first place. Like, what are they doing over here?
Yeah. I remember I was
Maori. What place does he have here?
No, again, we're slowly and steadily becoming this weird kind of criminal hub.
Oh, Andrew Giles, sorry, was the former minister I could think of. Okay, let's move on to climate and energy. So, the Australian National University, they released a study, I'm sure it's not biased at all, saying that nuclear power consumes about 1.4 times more water than coal to produce the same amount of electricity.
Yep.
So if the proposed nuclear plants by the coalition were to produce as much energy as the coal plants they're expected to replace, it would require 235,000 megalitres of water annually, which is about 67 millilitres above current consumption at the 7 coal sites that we have. Now, I don't know. I'm just going to defer to your scientific mind, Nolsey. Is this true that the nuclear requires a lot more water consumption than coal?
No, not really. It's about the same. The cooling towers are bigger just because, you do have to deal with like a general larger thermal mass. Than say a coal station, but it's not all that much more. That's the thing with water. Water just has it takes 4 kilojoules per kilogram to raise it a single degree, let alone the 100 to 70 to really functionally around about 80 degrees Celsius that these cooling towers run at. It's water for the sake of cooling is hyper efficient.
Right.
And trust me, by the way, I guarantee you that if you had a sufficiently sized solar power panel plant, that the residential water and water used for cleaning and pressure washing them would actually be a significant fraction of that just by itself, let alone the water used in its production and later disposal.
Right. But I mean, even if it did use that much, I mean, is that actually a big burden? Because assume you wouldn't have to be using clean water for it. I mean,
yeah, it does not have to be potable. It just can't be seawater. That's it.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of places use the nuclear power to run a desal, because the problem with desalination is the cost of energy needed for it. So that's why water in Australia is actually quite expensive, because a lot of it is RO desal water. So if you're set up right next to a nuclear power plant, you're running a desal plant to supply the relatively clean water. Not only can you actually just go and supply like municipal water from that, but you can also just use it for fucking cooling.
Right.
It's a self-solving problem. Energy is the biggest limiting factor with civil infrastructure. That's one of the biggest things. And if you're next to a fucking nuclear reactor putting out megawatts of fucking power, double-digit megawatts of fucking power in a reasonably sized facility, we're not even considering doing that. Then yeah, no, it's not a fucking problem. You're talking about cents a kilowatt hour.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it seems like just about every week, the ABC puts out one of these articles saying this aspect of nuclear is more expensive. Therefore, if you were to multiply it by all the plants done once, catastrophe. We're not going to be able to afford any of it.
Yeah. It's the most expensive form of power.
No, just a load of crap. All right, let's move to the Northern Territory. And there's kind of a few new policy announcements coming from the new Whanakiari government, most of which I think are actually pretty good, believe it or not. So along with a new lobbyist register, and, people like to do that so that there's a little bit more transparency on where political donations are going and who are the ones actually giving them and what for. But along with this, the Northern Territory government is defunding the Environment Centre Northern Territory, the ECNT, and the Arid Lands Environment Centre, ALEC. And they've already pulled funding from the Environmental Defenders Office. Now, if you haven't heard of any of these groups, don't worry. Basically what they are government-funded environmental lobby groups. And this is... It's such a bloody counterintuitive concept when you think of it, because, and this happens at the federal level as well, by the way. What happens is the government allocates all of these funds to these lobby groups, and it is their job to essentially bring the government or corporations to court, saying that you can't open this new project, this new power station, or this new mine, whatever it might be. So effectively, you've got like the Northern Territory government giving the green light to certain projects, and then these groups go and take it to court and say, no, 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 you can't do that. And it's just so contradictory, because that means the government was the one funding it in the first place. So it's essentially funding litigation against itself. So it's such a ridiculous concept. It shouldn't exist at any level of government. But green groups are going absolutely off their heads over this. Because, yeah, that will basically mean that more projects will get the green light and faster. Because, we've gone through some of these ones. Like, like a mine can actually take up to 10 years to get the go-ahead. Like, that's how bureaucratic it can be. And we know green groups love using lawfare. They love dragging it through the courts as long as they possibly can. And this is going to hinder their ability to do so. So
thank God. I mean, basically, they use lawfare because you really can't convince the public to pay more for electricity.
Yeah, definitely. And they haven't gotten all of their Green members of Parliament or their Teals in to make that much difference. So yeah, they have to rely on the courts instead.
I don't think, just on the concept of the fucking Teals, do you think they're going to survive this next run around?
I think a lot of them are going to be pushed out, and well, we've got more on. We've got a story just coming up on power prices. I think that people are going to want to punish the Teals for their power bill going up and up and up. And I just don't think the average Australian does not believe that green energy equals lower prices. I think
we're very aware that is not the case. No, did you see those graphs that were put out by the ABC recently, where it basically, this is a fact. Australia now has the most volatile power market in the entire world.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yep. The entire fucking world. Literally, there are fucking shithole countries which run half of their fucking place off a diesel generator with less volatile energy prices than us.
Yep. Okay, now on that note, here in WA, we are supposed to be replacing coal entirely with renewables by 2030, or at least we said it would be close to that date. Now, while we are certainly on track in terms of closing our coal mining and our coal fire stations, we are not on track for building the green energy infrastructure needed to replace it, not by a long shot. So coming from the ABC, I say Synergy has already allocated nearly 90% of the $3.7 billion that was originally set aside for wind farms and large-scale battery projects. In other words, they've already spent most of the money that was supposed to go to building this infrastructure. They've only got a little bit of it left, and we are still way, way behind. And obviously that means the government is going to be left to go for extra funding. So cost blowouts, yes, again, for green energy. And Jesus, man, I can only imagine what it's going to be like when we get up to that date. And, Collie is a ghost town. And we're relying on fucking wind farms. Jesus. I mean, we got the most unstable power now? What?
Volatile. The price is because basically the price is so fucking volatile, so it's always being sold higher. Because the active power supply can actually say like, "Hey, look, we've got this kilowatt for you now," because a kilowatt needs to be used in the moment that it's created, or at least very soon thereafter. And And basically they're saying like, hey, look, you don't know if you're going to get 70 kilowatts from this supply over here. You don't know about grid stability in the next half of a minute. So guess what? You're going to pay us an absolute shit ton for this kilowatt hour, and they can do that.
Right.
Also, you'll notice there's been some puff pieces about the normalization of brownouts.
Yeah.
And that is just part and parcel of an expanding grid. You're not expanding the grid. If you're adding like significantly more infrastructure to the grid, I would say, okay, maybe, yeah, you brown things out because like you need to like do additions and modifications. Everyone knows about a planned blackout, But no, they're literally saying like, no, this is just going to be a normal thing now going forwards. To our South African listeners, I hope you feel at home.
I was just going to say, because, like brownouts and even blackouts in some areas are like common in South Africa now. But that's because you have a third world population that's unable to sustain the infrastructure that was bequeathed to them. So you can do it that way, or you can piss up your money on green energy instead. Both of them will get you a lot of brownouts, a lot of blackouts. Yep. Okay, now on energy bills. So the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship Research, I'm sorry, I'm sure that is a partisan group of some kind, but I haven't looked into them. But they put out a study that said energy bills could rise by nearly 70% over the next 10 years under current government policy. So there we go. Really? You want to tell us again that clean energy is the cheapest and most reliable source? Why would it cost? Why would it take our power bills up 70% then?
It's a necessary sacrifice. By the way, can you just burn up your standard of living? Not because there's something tangible or something that I can actually accurately show you, but a whole bunch of international NGOs has decided that it's going to help the planet. It's not global leveling or anything. It's not lowering your standards of living or your perceived standards of living so we can flood you with infinite hordes of, mouths and hands to consume and literally make money for our investor class. No, it's not that at all, is it?
Right. All right, let's move on to the economy. Now, it might be Tuesday by the time a lot of you guys are listening to this podcast, so maybe this news has already broken. That is the RBA, their decision on interest rates. A lot of people are tipping a cut. The current rate, I believe, is 4.35%, and so they might move it by 0.25 or even 0.5. We don't know. But anyway, according to the Australian, they've said that a rate cut would perhaps not deliver the Albanese government a pre-election boost. They said the reason why is because, according to polling, interest rates doesn't rate very highly. Funnily enough, they said crime and antisocial behaviour are right up there. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, those are more immediate. And they're becoming more forward-centered recently.
Yes,
we're now in an era because I'm sort of wind this back a little bit. A leftist talking point is like crime and violence isn't actually getting worse. You're just being exposed to it more. For the last 4 or so odd years, that's been a lie. It has actually been objectively, not relatively, not etc. Objectively getting worse. The hard objective number, the solid number, has been going up, both in proportion and as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, they used to hide behind the fact that, like, overall crime rates were trending down. And that's basically because, like, if you look at white populations, that has been the general trajectory for the past few centuries. Is that we just gradually get less and less criminal. And of course, if you look at those areas of the world that are like 99% white, like Iceland, honestly, crime in Iceland basically doesn't exist.
The police
only
are just a second group of firefighters. They're like the police in Iceland are general purpose firefighters. You call them for a cat stuck up the tree.
Yeah, they don't carry guns. They
Yeah,
don't have guns. There's just no need for them.
I need a public servant to help me because I'm stuck in some kind of situation that I can't get myself out of. So I call the emergency number. So the public servant called the police. Hold on, I guess it's what policy, or whatever the fuck they call them over there. Can just come and, I don't know, help me out of a ditch.
Yeah, so for a while, leftists were able to hide behind those numbers in the crime data. That even though, say, African crime would have been skyrocketing, they would still just go, oh, well, look, but overall crime, has gone down. And sometimes also the other thing driving that was not just an overall, reduction in crime. It was the fact that they weren't enforcing the law. A lot of people were committing crime and it was not going reported and it was not being followed up either. When Middle Eastern crime first hit Sydney in the early 80s, there were police no-go zones. So crime just wasn't recorded there. So that's the other aspect of it you've got to take into account. Anyway, what I was going to say here, with this polling data that was looked at by, this is just news poll. All right, interest rates were down on the list. They didn't rate very highly, but the number one issue was cost of living. Okay, now obviously interest rates has an impact on cost of living, so I guess it would all depend on the flow-on effects. If there is a rate cut, will that actually make things that much easier for people in their everyday cost of living? Well, if it did, that would, I'm sure, turn into a pre-election boost for Labor. But, if it's only 25 basis points or something, it's probably not going to have that much of an effect. So yeah. Bring on the Hun in Parliament.
Oh, boy.
Okay, now just quickly on the tariffs, the 25% tariffs that were imposed last week by Trump. We've gotten a lot of mixed messages over this because Albanese said that he had a productive talk with Donald Trump where he said that an exemption for Australian products I think steel and aluminium, or aluminum as the Americans call it.
Silly Americans.
The Americans were considering an exemption. When Trump signed that law, because it was an executive order, he said that these were across the board, no exceptions or exemptions. And later, when he was asked in a press conference, were there exemptions going to be made for Australia, he said that they were considering it. So don't rely on Trump for consistency, whatever you do. But it does look like they are still negotiating this. And maybe we'll get an exemption or maybe we'll get a reduced amount. We'll see. All right. Now on to industrial relations. Things are still kicking off in Sydney over the train lines there. So I think it was today, more than 300 workers on train services stayed at home. I believe there was also a large amount who stayed home on Friday as well. And the lot on Friday, it was reported that an unprecedented amount of workers had called in sick. So that's what we call blue flu, where they all arranged previously.
Right, it's a strike. It's a strike by any other name.
Yeah. So everyone just agrees to chuck a sickie on the same day. And that's obviously what was going on there. The New South Wales government has brought this to the Fair Work Commission. They're trying to rule what they've been doing as illegal industrial action. I don't think they've done so yet. last time I checked anyway. So apparently this current industrial action by these workers is legal. But yeah, obviously this is all designed to get them back to the negotiating table. And they're still talking about things like safer trains and all of that. But, they're talking about wages. And there's nothing wrong with talking about wages. I just wish they'd be a bit more honest about that. But apparently, this has also heightened talk of the possibility of using driverless trains. I don't know how safe that would be. I haven't really looked into this. But so many people are getting disrupted, late for work, late getting home, whatever, by all of this action that has been going on for a long time now, that there is a mood saying, can we just sack them all and replace them with, AI trains?
We're getting to that point, aren't we?
Yeah. But it seems like every 2 weeks, I read one of these stories, more industrial action on the train service. It's just all the time.
Oh, God.
All right. Now, here's a story some people might find a little unusual. So our Labor's state treasurer here in WA has actually criticised the federal government for increasing the amount of unionisation on West Australian mine sites. So Rita Safiotti is referring to the new industrial relations laws that were passed last year by the federal government. We remember that this included multi-employer bargaining, or pattern bargaining, which was designed to bring more collective bargaining back on the table for workers. But another purpose of those laws was to provide incentives for workers to join unions. You had a much better chance of actually being represented, having your interests represented by a union and through a collective agreement. But apparently WA is uncomfortable about that. They're saying that it could lead to a bunch of unnecessary costs and that it would threaten the GST revenue that we produce for the Commonwealth. Well, all GST money is allocated to the states in the end, but remember, it is the Commonwealth who first collects it and then redistributes it, and we in WA we get way less of it. We get so much less than what we've actually paid
fucked.
in. Yeah, whereas Tasmania gets a lot more.
I remember back in the old racism chat servers that was actually a legitimate topic of discussion. Why the fuck does WA get such a low percentage of the GST? Guys talking about international conspiracies and all kinds of all that shit, fucking just shitting on people from the subcontinent.
There's nothing elaborate about it.
Yeah, it's just Also, I guess it's a legitimate grievance that you guys have over there that you don't get shithole in GST.
Yeah, and I think we do have a new deal now. It's not new anymore. It's been around for a few years. But Mark McGowan did actually negotiate a new GST deal that a lot of the eastern states said was unfair on them, basically just because we got a little bit more than what we were previously getting. But anyway, all of that stuff, and the argument that West Australian mines are like the powerhouse of the West Australian economy and to an extent the national economy, WA Labor is saying that all of that is currently under threat because of their own party's industrial relations laws at the federal level. What they're also concerned about is that the Greens, they're pushing for extra taxes on the mining sector and resources generally, as well as wanting to impose a whole heap of green tape on them and shutting a lot of their projects down. And just remember this, when we go to the election, which is actually only about 3 weeks away now, WA election, the Greens have got a lot better chance of getting upper house seats because of the electoral reforms that were passed by Mark McGowan a couple of years ago. We actually just vote in one super district now for the upper house. And look, long story short, basically it's so that people in the regions get less members. And what a surprise that it actually favours Labor and the Greens. So the Greens, we could end up in a situation where the Greens hold the balance of power in the upper house in the next election. So yeah, all of those factors combined could actually hurt our mining sector.
Yes. Which is well, if you actually really put a heavy dent in the mining sector, you will absolutely obliterate Perth. Because even the Perth, skyscraper service industries, what's the fucking logo on all those buildings?
Oh yeah, BHP, yeah. Rio Tinto, South 32, they're all
FMG.
They're all resource companies, all of our skyscrapers, almost.
Either that or oil, man, and that's about it.
Right. Okay, so so we've got the results of what's been called a damming probe into the New South Wales CFMEU. Now, the main thing that they were looking at here was the transfer of over $3 million worth of members' funds to pay for legal bills for the New South Wales. Well, he used to be the secretary. Now he's not, because the government has taken it over. It's under administration now. But Darren Greenfield, and also his son. His son seemed to be almost as involved in the New South Wales CFMEU as his dad. So anyway, they reckon they have diverted over $3 million of funds into battling their own court battles. And they're claiming that this was illegal, it was completely improper, and that they're now recommending criminal charges against Darren Greenfield and his son. So, yeah, it seems to kind of just be going from bad to worse for New South Wales CFMEU and I guess CFMEU around the country right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there any quarter where they're actually doing fucking well? Because they've been obliterated over here for quite some fucking time. The entire John Setka scandal put a real big fucking dent in them in their stronghold in Victoria. And then, now you got New South Wales. Are they doing well in Queensland? Tasmania? I don't know.
No, well, you see, in Queensland, they've actually got an LNP government now, so it's even worse for them.
Oh, there we go.
I mean, if they know that they've got a federal Labor government on their side, then, a state Liberal government is not going to hold back after them. They're going to go after them with full force.
Fuck no, yeah.
Okay. So, on to housing. So, the Barangaroo development in Sydney, so this is on the foreshore of Sydney Harbour, has finally been approved. Oh, and there you go. This is actually an example of a project that took 10 years to go ahead. Now, this isn't really to do with green lobbying. This is to do with people not wanting their view of the harbour blocked off. This is a big, big thing when it comes to apartment buildings. You've always got to wonder, the person I'm building in front of, am I going to block their view from whatever? And, they'll battle that stuff out in the councils and the courts for a long time. And yeah, in this case, it is actually a whole 10 years. Anyway, this will include, so this is a precinct that will include hospitality, retail, and residential buildings. It should begin construction before the end of the year and is scheduled to be completed by early 2030. So this is one of the things that the government really wanted, the New South Wales government really wanted this to push ahead, simply because of the housing crisis. And, this is just an example of one of those projects that I don't like because it is high density urban living, which is, a high density urban lifestyle for just about anyone is not really good for your physical or your mental health. This has been studied, living in quieter areas where there's more of a community, where there is less people, however, people know each other better, and you've actually got a backyard to do some gardening and have some pets, and can let the kids play out the back.
Don't trust me with those, I'll kill all three.
But that's it. I mean, that's what it should be. The Australian dream of owning a house, it should be along those lines, not owning some fucking shoebox where you're surrounded by Indians on Sydney's harbour. Fuck that. All right.
Pleased to be redeeming new Australian dream, sir.
All right. Well, on that note, foreign buyers. So the federal government is going to ban the purchase of Australian homes by foreign buyers for 2 years with an exemption for new homes. Now, this was actually coalition policy. This has been public policy of the coalition for a while now. And the federal government's actually pinched it. And they've admitted, okay, maybe this will be a good idea. Now, I did read before, I really doubt these figures, but the ABC reckon that apparently only 2% of our property market is foreign owned, and that when it comes to new purchases, they reckon only 1% of new purchases are as a result of foreign investment.
Okay, so here's the snafu. If you're a foreign investor and you want to actually buy a property in a country, what you do is there's normally some kind of property management and property asset acquisition company you go to, which is natively registered. So in the eyes of the government, it is just an Australian company buying it. You give them the money to buy the property and they hold it for you like an asset. And in a lot of cases, they can even offer services like renting it out and management and maintenance.
Right.
So
we're kind of obscuring.
1%. Yeah, 1% when a fucking citizen shows up and doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. The rest of it is in fact, Chinese people do this as well. The lower middle class in China, they'll pull together in a corporation with, 16 different people. They'll be registered to some office in fucking Box Hill. And we'll just go buy properties and apartment buildings around Victoria using the collective capital put in by these Chinese citizens. Yeah,
I mean, just when I saw those figures, I was like, I know that can't be true. Or at least there has to be a bigger picture.
Yeah. And also just the property investor class in Australia is doing right fucking well. And that's me coming off of last year selling my old place when I bought it for like $625 and I sold it for a little bit gross of $900. 3 years I was at that fucking place. 3 fucking years. It's $100,000 a fucking year.
These foreign investors as well, they're basically just buying places so that they can just eternally rent them out.
Yes.
So every time they buy one of those properties, that's now one property that an Australian will not have the chance to own themselves. And it just gets concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, where it's just, you end up like New York City, where no one buys an apartment, The top
you rent it from
Schmooly of investors, yes, who tend to wear funny hats and stuff. They just own it all. All right. Okay, now, Labor's $10 billion social housing fund apparently has made more than twice its target rate of return in the first year of operation. So they're very pleased about this. So this was 185 projects totaling 13,700 homes, and they were approved for grants last October, with at least 12 now finalised and the final projects under construction. I think this might be the only thing where Labor's running on time. I haven't read any other success stories here. But I'll make the point again. What is social housing? Certainly in these cases, it's just apartment blocks. And this is even worse. You put a bunch of like unemployed and in many cases, criminal people all living next to each other. I used to live across the road from like a public housing estate, and it wasn't an apartment block. It was actually just a whole bunch of houses, like just built next to each other. I don't know if you were familiar with it, Nolsey. You might have seen it. But anyway, thankfully, we only had one incident where some guys, they stole a car and then they actually ran through our back fence and they broke our fence.
Wait, was that the fence? Was that the place that I saw back in the day?
Yeah.
Okay, so you fuckers never told me why the fence was broken. Okay, now that makes sense, and that was just never repaired. That was just never fucking repaired.
It was. It took them a while. Like who we were renting through. Like I reported it straight away, and then I had to go and make a bloody police report and everything so that I wouldn't be blamed for it. But anyway, I don't know if you remember, there was all this like empty land at the front of our house.
Yes.
That used to be a public housing estate. And man, when I first moved into that area, it was like a daily occurrence to hear police sirens or just like screaming all the time, like all these domestic situations going on. And that's because it was social housing. There was a lot of Aborigines.
It wasn't much different when it was gone.
No. That's what I was going to say. It was very different when it was gone.
Yes,
once it was gone,
it wasn't horrific. It wasn't horrific.
The police sirens suddenly stopped. All the screaming and like the domestic overhearing of domestic violence situations that stopped. So
this is personally why I picked neighborhoods with a whole bunch of old people. I went from old English people to old Italians and Greeks.
Yeah, but in WA we tend to we build like one house by itself in amongst just regular houses. They even do it in the rich suburbs like Cottesloe. Imagine that, like being on the social housing waiting list, and you suddenly get promoted to living in Cottesloe. I don't think the neighbours would like it very much, though. Okay, Labor may be very, very slightly easing the housing shortage at the moment, but, not in a great way.
No.
Okay, final story here. This was an interesting one. Jim Chalmers is going to move to make it so that if you go and apply for a mortgage, so you can buy a house, banks should not be allowed to take into account your HECS debt if you have a HECS debt or a HELP debt, if you have a uni debt. So this has said to be a barrier for a lot of people, especially now, you've got a lot of millennials buying houses and, around what, like 50% of millennials maybe went, what?
Buying? Are we sure about the buying part?
Well, okay. Well, they're trying. They're trying to buy, and they're getting knocked back. Like, I had a friend knocked back a couple of weeks ago because, like, he just had a bad credit rating because there was, like, a credit card he missed a couple of payments on. And that has, like, for now anyway, like, blocked him out of a mortgage, which is really weird because his partner works. They both work full-time, and he actually earns he's on six figures, and they've got a lot saved. But just because of, like, a few unpaid credit card payments years ago, they get knocked back for a mortgage. So, stuff like that is unfair, I think. But I don't know. With the HECS debt, though, I mean, they can be pretty big.
Yeah, they can.
people
And
out
also,
there.
again, I'm not a financial advisor, kids, but I do recommend putting your utility bills on your credit card and then paying them off at the prescribed date, just to build up your credit score.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And at the very least, have like automatic. I've got mine set up so like if I ever like go over my credit card limit, it just automatically takes it from my main account. You've got to do simple
Yeah,
things like that.
the credit card's there not to help you. The credit card's there to make the fucking bank money.
Right. But, it should also be there for you to build up a good credit rating for yourself as well. That'll pay off. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of, I'd have to read into this more. I mean, look, on the surface of it, yeah, I like the idea of like more people who've been struggling to get a mortgage, if they can actually get one, get support from the bank, that's a good thing. But the flip side of this, reading the story from The Australian, they said that a lot of economists are warning that the flow-on effects from that would actually put housing prices up.
Yes.
And yeah, maybe it would. So yeah, maybe in the long term it might not be such a good idea. Okay.
God. But I think for the long term and the short term and just a general good answer, we should immediately consider not India forever at all.
Yes.
I don't know how to voice my feelings without breaking the law.
You got to constantly walk on eggshells. All right. We're on to Aboriginal news. I just posted this story earlier on the socials. So a man has been found guilty under Western Australia's Aboriginal Heritage Act. And I must remind people, these are not new laws. They did have new laws for a while, but then there was such a public outcry about it, they were repealed. And these laws, I believe, actually go all the way back to the 1970s. All right. But anyway, this is a guy who was he in 2J?
2J was, yeah.
He, on his own property, there was like a little waterway and he built a bridge over the top of it. Just so you could walk over the water. Right? Pretty innocent thing to do. Anyway, he has been fined $2,000 and he has to pay court costs of $5,000. So essentially he's been fined $7,000 for breaching the Aboriginal Heritage Act. Now, this is because in the area where he built the bridge, the Noongar Rainbow Serpent, or the spirit of that rainbow serpent, apparently lives there. Okay? This is not hyperbole, all right? These are the actual claims that are given by the Aboriginal corporations or elders or whatever. And when he did this, he did not receive the appropriate permission for it. Now, this is despite the fact that before he built it, he went to the council. He ticked all the boxes from the local council, which usually is end of story. You get the council approval, which very often can be enough of a pain in the ass. And that's it. Once you've got the approval, you go and you build or you modify, whatever it might be. But no, he was taken to court later on and told that he has disturbed the rainbow serpent of the Noongar people with the construction of a bridge on his own property.
Oh boy.
Why do we have these laws? All I can say is, thank Christ those other laws that we had for a while, thank God they were repealed.
Yes.
I can't imagine,
fucking God. No, they would have raped. They would have fucking dragged him out by his ankles, pulled his trousers down, and raped him on his fucking porch. Fuck me.
Infuriating.
I know he's looking, and actually, good on him. I know he's looking to repeal the fine and take it as far. Like he said on the radio, he wanted to take it as far as he needs to because he doesn't believe that any of this is correct. Which, yes, good on him for doing so. Good on him for having the fortitude to.
I don't know if I fancy his chances, though. I mean, yeah, I agree,
No.
fight it. But, unfortunately, these laws really
Make this
are
the biggest fucking piss up possible, because the voice to Parliament is still fresh in everyone's mind. Maybe it'll cause a little political uproar and embarrass some people, maybe.
This was actually headline news on ABC.
Yes.
Or at least if you live in WA, it is.
It was on the radio, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Okay. Let's, still in Aboriginal news, we'll go to the Northern Territory, as we often do. So the new CLP, Country Liberal Party government, has decided to phase out local decision-making agreements, LDMs. Now, what these are agreements between local governments and councils to basically transfer more control to remote Aboriginal communities, like a form of self-governance or whatever. Now, this was a policy of the previous Labor government. There were a number of these agreements made. The CLP says that they will honour those agreements from that time. However, none will be made again. And once the expiry is reached on all those existing agreements, that's it. It'll be gone because this was never CLP policy. The CLP are actually doing quite a few things to upset the Aboriginal lobby in the NT, and that's just one of them. Well, here's one. This one's angered them even more. They have confirmed that they have discontinued the treaty process in the Territory. So the process for arriving at a treaty between the Northern Territory government and Northern Territory Aborigines, this was put into place back in 2018, as you can imagine, by Territory Labor. And this was one of those policies that the CLP really only got behind after the no vote came through in the referendum. Because then they suddenly saw, well, hey, all of these Aboriginal programs and laws and everything that we spend so much money on and waste so much time on, they're actually not that popular, are they? So maybe we can repeal them. We've seen a similar thing in Queensland. Even though the government there previously supported things like treaty and the voice and truth-telling, now they're going back on a lot of that stuff. So, yeah, another good move by the CLP. Okay, now the federal government, of course, the Federal Indigenous Affairs spokeswoman is Jacinta Price. She said that the federal government, or the coalition if they were returned to government, they would retain the Indigenous procurement policy. So that has delivered $10 billion to businesses owned or part-owned by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So more favouritism. Now, Jacinta Price likes to always go on about how Aboriginal people should not be treated any differently from anyone else. Why is she supporting this program then? So Labor is about to boost Commonwealth funding awarded to Indigenous businesses from 2.5% to 4% by 2030. And Jacinta Price is fine with that timeline and that amount. So another example here of where you will elect the coalition government and you'll get absolutely nothing different. Now,
Lord help us.
She's also called on the federal government to intervene in the Central Land Council. This is yet another Aboriginal body. I won't get into explaining it. We know the usual We know the gist of it. But anyway, it's being headed by the chair, Warren Williams. And it turns out, what a surprise, this guy has a huge rap sheet dating back to 2008. So that includes assault and contravening domestic violence orders. Now, to be fair, apparently he has not offended since 2015. And he says that he has since redeemed himself. You know, one thing I might say to defend him is say, well, if you don't give the job to him, what choices other than him do you have? Because I would say all the other candidates would have pretty extensive criminal histories as well, unless you get a white fella who claims he's Aboriginal. If you want to do the real deal here, you want to get an authentic Aborigine, and this guy is, by the way, if you have a look at him, he's proper black, proper flat nose and everything. You're pretty much only going to be left with a guy like him. You don't have much choice.
I want to find the most dysfunctional fucker possible. Again, we said this when the Aboriginal Voice Department was like fucking thing. It was like, yeah, let's do it, but like only pure-blooded Aboriginals, and let's install a fucking their own personal bar and just see what the fuck happens. You know, it's just, oh man.
That would have been an enthusiastic yes vote from me.
Oh god.
Okay. The other thing that the government is looking into when it comes to the granting of this money is operators engaging in what's known as black cladding. Now, all that is where they claim to be Aboriginal, but they're not. And then they get money for it. So they said, there's going to be a big crackdown on black cladding, on fake Aborigines, or people claiming that there's actually like an X percentage of Aboriginal shareholdership and stuff like that in order to get advantages and play the system.
I mean, they've literally dealt it up in a way that is like the most profitable thing you can do right now.
All right, on to the related issue of crime. Now, this is one that surprised me. We're back to the Northern Territory again, and Alice Springs businesses are saying that they will voluntarily maintain a minimum alcohol price. So this was set at you can't charge any less than $1.30 per standard drink. Now, this was actually introduced by Labor because it was basically one of those things they had to do. And this is to stop the widespread drinking of goon, of cheap wine. Because, I remember like you could get like a 5-liter cask of Coolabah for $15. 5 liters of wine. So, no wonder a lot of them were, dole day comes, as soon as that money is deposited, there you go, in for the bags of Coolabah. Now, interestingly though, the CLP, the Country Liberal Party, is choosing not to make this compulsory. So this was actually an enforced minimum price, and now they're scrapping it for some reason. But Alice Springs businesses say they're going to maintain it. And I can only imagine that's because they themselves have witnessed a reduction in drunken Aboriginal crime.
Didn't some fucking Aboriginal stab some dude to death 2 years ago?
In a bottle shop. It was a 19-year-old guy.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I'll maintain it too.
Look, really what should happen is Aborigines should just all live in a dry zone, like one big dry zone where none of them are allowed alcohol at all, or smokes or petrol. That's the way I would have it. You want to have like a proper like treaty and agreement?
A zoo.
We can carve up some land. That's fine. You can have some land. But no bailouts from us. We don't pay for anything. and no substances, no alcohol, no ciggies, nothing. All right. So, in Queensland, members of Parliament will receive an allowance of up to $6,500 for home security measures. Now, this is to do with an increase in violent threats against state politicians. Wow. So, we're becoming more and more American, I guess. You could maybe even say more and more British, because I know a lot of their MPs have increasingly come under threat. And there was that, I think it was a Labor politician who was stabbed to death a couple of years ago.
Yep.
Yeah, apparently our own local members are getting threats like this. I'm not sure why it would happen in particular in Queensland. Maybe they do have something similar in place in other jurisdictions. I'm not sure. This is the first I've read about it. But yeah, I find that weird. I can understand it happening at the federal level, but it's a bit weird. Like where I live, I've seen our local member. Like, he's come to the door here. I've seen him out and about, like in the shops and stuff. Like it's usually the state MP has no problem getting out and about and doesn't need any security whatsoever.
I mean, you would kind of hope so.
yeah, but why have we got this coming from Queensland then? Assuming this is true, it was the clerk of the Parliament acknowledged this, and so
is there some kind of misruling or etc. that we're missing in Queensland?
No. So this allowance, this is so that they can install, repair, or upgrade home security systems such as CCTV, security screens, or lighting, as recommended by Queensland Police or a security advisor. It looks legit.
Oh. Yeah, I think either it's a grant scam, like not to point fingers, but a certain Levantine community, or Levant community likes to not Levantine, not Leaven bread. No, Levant community likes to get security grants, give them to like some kind of dodgy contractor, and get paid and quietly and succinctly through some other transaction.
Yeah, but I did consider that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're just talking about local MPs.
Yes,
it's not. It's not.
Are they preparing for some really shitty ruling that they know? Because people in Queensland can be quite animated.
I guess so. I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, I'm stumped too. It's probably the first time we've been properly stumped on this show.
Well, I mean, look, they do have a new LNP government in power, and it's absolutely true that threats of political violence come from the left a lot more than they come from the right. So, I mean, yeah, there's that. I don't know, maybe reversing the Aboriginal policies, maybe approving...
Could do, yeah.
Oh, they did. That's right. They scrapped support for that hydrogen plant because that needed an extra $1 billion of funding, and they said, no, we're not doing that. So that's effectively killed that project. Yeah, it might be to do with green energy stuff. I mean, remember that Dutch guy who everyone said was like extreme right-wing? Pim Fortuyn. And then it turned out he was actually a gay guy who just didn't like Muslims pouring in. He was killed by a greenie. Like, when he was assassinated, everyone was like, oh, I bet it was a Muslim. No, it wasn't. It was a bloody environmental activist who killed him. All right. Okay, so Northern Territory again. Police officers have been told that the pledge to fund long-term retention bonuses, and that includes for officers that have been there for 20 years of service receiving an extra $20,000, that this may not actually happen.
What the fuck?
So anyone who's followed criminal news in the Northern Territory knows that there's a severe shortage of police officers and prison officers
Anyone
and security.
who's
Anyone involved in emergency services or security or crime prevention, there's a shortage of all of them. So, one of the ways, obviously, you can attempt to fix that is actually just paying the cops more money. So, in this case, it was meant to be retention bonuses. Now, they're saying that they're not going to make good on a lot of them, and that's simply because of the fact that they don't have the money. So when it comes up to the budgeting they're doing for the Northern Territory Police, they're just saying they can't afford it now. So they are going to be spitting chips over this. Because they have enormous amount of trouble getting new staff, recruiting. But they've got almost as bad a problem when it comes to retaining staff. So, I mean, how many cops do you think are going to read this and just go, all right, fuck it, I throw in the towel now? So this
I'm just going to say, like,
promise they should have kept.
Yeah, no, literally, like, if you wanted to actually fucking find the one police force in this entire country that does really functionally need to be paid more, yes, it is the Northern Territory cops. I don't think at their current pay rate, even if you had an ideologically motivated dude, you had a dude who fucking, like, jumped out of his bed, breathed in deep, and just whispered, justice. I don't think that dude would stick around for the fucking pay rate the Northern Territory cops go for. Which is still high, by the way, but still not enough. And that's from a person who really hates fucking authority.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to carry water for cops, but, I mean, we fully defended Zachary Rolfe at the time, and I'll still defend him. And, it may well be that if I met Zachary Rolfe in everyday life, I may not even like the guy. I don't know. The point is, he was attacked.
I would probably call him a slur to his face for being a police officer.
Yeah, but he discharged his duties as he was supposed to as a cop, and he was completely mistreated by his own union, by his own senior police
officers,
and certainly by the media. Okay, now related to that, Northern Territory police officers have just walked off the job, and that was in protest of planned legislation to allow private and interstate guards to be hired in the Territory's prisons. I think we did talk about this last week. So again, huge shortage of prison officers in the Northern Territory. And they've resorted to this before, like when it came to just like public security, they were having to hire people from interstate. And a lot of the time, like businesses were hiring security simply because of the fact that there wasn't enough police around. And so, it just made sense to get private security to do the job instead. So the prison officers don't like that. Now, I can understand that, why they wouldn't like it. Like, staff coming in who have been trained differently, who would, perhaps hold themselves to different standards as they would. That would certainly be irritating. But the thing is, do they really have an alternative right now? I mean, obviously the best thing to do would just be pay them more. Pay them more and you will get more officers. Basic economics. But I mean, right now, when they've got such a severe shortage, I mean, they do kind of have to resort to desperate measures, I think. I'm not really sure what else they could do.
Yeah.
All right. So, on the topic of political donations and electoral reform, so legislation has just passed the Parliament. It was supported by the major parties, but it was generally opposed by the independents and the minor parties. Now, this was about limits to how much you could donate to a political candidate. So, I agree with the Teals and the other independents here. These laws are not fair. So here's what they do. I should point out before I read what they do, they won't actually come into effect until after this year's election. So, 2025, these rules won't apply. But anyway, single candidates will be barred from spending more than $800,000 on their campaign. However, a political party can spend up to $90 million annually on a campaign. Huh? So, obviously, those laws have been drawn up at the expense of independent candidates, because independents don't have a political party that they are a member of. In the case of the Teals, okay, fine, you could kind of argue the Climate 200 is their party, but not on paper, not officially. So that means they would simply not be able to spend any more than $800,000 on their own campaign, and that's it. There would be no party funds on top of that, whereas all the other political parties have a limit of $90 million that they can spend on a campaign. So, yeah, that's bullshit. That really is.
Well, I wonder why these limitations have just been suddenly put in place.
They're trying to freeze independents out of the race, and this is one of those times where you'll get bipartisan support, of course, Both Labor and the Coalition want this equally. All right. Let's go to the elections. So the Werribee by-election, we've got a result on that now. Labor have maintained it, so the new member will be John Lister, who had some trashy tattoo on his arm when I saw him. He's a local teacher. Looks like a young guy. Looks like he's only about 30 or so. Now, worth pointing out, though, that they went to this election because of the retirement of Tim Pallas, the former treasurer. He held that seat, red ribbon Labor safe seat, on a margin of 10.9%. In this by-election, there was a swing of 10% against Labor. So they actually or at least they believed to end up only holding this with a margin of less than 1%. So even though Labor have held on to it, that's a loss in a lot of ways, especially considering this is the seat of a former treasurer and a safe seat. That's a very bad sign. So, finally, the Victorian opposition might be able to see the next election as producing a victory for them after spending 3 terms out of office. We'll wait and see. Okay, so the last sitting of Parliament has just wrapped up, at least, for that schedule. Albo said a few things in Parliament that suggested that a new parliamentary sitting will not be called before the next election. That has prompted a lot of people to think that we will get an early election. Most people are saying April. Some are saying maybe even as early as March. I don't think it'll happen in March because that'll be way too close to the WA election. So I'm thinking mid or late April. But anyway, we should be getting it sooner. It was scheduled to be May of this year, so we probably will get it a little sooner. Now, the results of a YouGov poll. This suggests that the coalition would be likely to win 73 seats with a lower estimate of 65 and upper estimate of 80 if a federal election were held today. Now, you need 76 seats, isn't it, I think, to win a majority in the House. Anyway, what they're saying is the coalition would end up with more seats than Labor, Labour would end up on 66 seats, by the way. And that means that you would more than likely have the coalition cobbling together a coalition with minor parties, independents, etc., to have their own minority government if these results are taken seriously. I don't know. It's still possible, even if you ended up with less seats than the other. If you can get the support of the independents and the minor parties, you can still make a majority, though, even though you came in with less seats. So, yeah, anything could happen.
Oh, man.
Oh, God. So, even though the official campaign has not started yet, Labour has already started some attack ads. One that shows a 2014 press conference that apparently shows Peter Dutton calling for an end to free healthcare. Now, Labour do this just about every election. It's called the Medi-Scare campaign.
Yeah.
I think the first time I heard that...
They're going to fuck your health. They're going to fuck your health. Also, we're going to fuck your health. It's a little bit slower.
I think the first
We're going
time
to fuck your health
that,
with lube.
It might have existed before this, but I remember in 2019, Bill Shorten was suggesting that Scott Morrison wanted to abolish Medicare completely, which of course was not true. But nonetheless, they go with that. So now they're trying to suggest that the Dutton wants to just abolish healthcare altogether. Well, come on. I mean, what are the chances of that actually happening? It's one of those things where you just want to say to the left, like, don't worry. Even if Peter Dutton does become Prime Minister, don't worry. There's no way they're going to defund things like that. That is all just scare campaigning. Oh, did you see Albo get heckled? You're on mute. Okay, Nolsey might have gone for another piss there, I think, without telling me. So anyway, I remember reading the headlines of this. It said that there were hecklers, or the crowd heckles. It was actually just one guy.
Crowd.
It was one guy.
One guy. You got pissy over one fucking dude being pissy. Oh my god.
Like he was loud. Like you could clearly hear him and everything, and he was a disruption. But like,
I mean, that is a heckler.
Crowd. It was like, no, it was one guy. But anyway, what I was more interested in was that this was to launch the endorsement of Labor's candidate for the seat of Whitlam. Her name is Carol Berry. And the reason I find this interesting is because she is actually the former Greens Party National Secretary. So, in other words, someone who certainly has her roots, at least, in the Green left. Now, what is also interesting about this, in the seat that she is running in, Whitlam, this is an industrial seat. It is home to steelworks and to a coal terminal in Port Kembla. So, you've got a lot of blue-collar workers here who are reliant on resources and energy. And all of a sudden, they're running like, what you could probably argue is an environmental radical in that seat who would like to just shut down projects like that. So it's an interesting choice, and I really think they'd want to do that because, what's his name? Joel Fitzgibbon in his seat of Hunter. He was like a very pro-resources, pro-industry guy. He was Labour, but he only managed to hang on because, he supported those industries and therefore supported the blue-collar jobs that it produced. You cannot say that about this woman. So, I don't know. On the face of it anyway, this strategically looks like a bad move from Albo, in my view. Okay, so Climate 200.
Did you actually
they're rallying.
Sorry, just wind it back a little bit. Just on Albo, did you see that it seems like on Valentine's Day, it was like roses are red, Violets are blue. In Australia, we love our blue-collar workers while making fuck me eyes with that one really, really scared-looking construction worker.
No, I didn't.
Best moment in Australian politics this year.
You know, still from time to time, I see someone who has the bumper sticker, no jobs on a dead planet. It's a Greens bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Now, what are they saying by that? You know, it's like, yeah, we have to take your jobs to save the planet.
Yes. It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Not my Fremantle fucking artisan toast and coffee, though. Otherwise, I'll chuck a hissy fit. You know, there should be flash protests at, like, fucking really ritzy, yuppie places in Fremantle. Fuck, I'll be able...
Yeah.
I need to organize some guys. We need to go fucking do that.
All right. Oh, yeah. So, Climate 200. What a surprise they're backing an independent candidate. That's just what they do. And that this time, they're actually going after a Labour seat. So, this is Julie Collins. And there's also, what is it? Oh, yeah. So, former Liberal Brendan Blomey. He's come up as a Conservative independent. So I'm assuming he left the Liberal Party because they weren't conservative enough for him. That's not an uncommon thing, actually. Oh, okay. So let me just read this out. So the decision by a climate-focused independent support group came as a Conservative independent. Former Liberal Brendan Blomey confirmed his intention to challenge Julie Collins. This is in the southern Tasmanian seat. Climate 200 will contribute $30,000 to Mr. George's campaign. And Peter George is an anti-salmon campaigner. He's already thought to have over $100,000 in his war chest. So I think we've got a story on this later. Both Labor and the Coalition are pro-salmon farming. They want to keep those industries going. Green groups and teal independents do not. They want to shut them down, basically. Now, even though Labor support salmon farming, some people are still kind of skeptical. You know, it's sort of like with the Adani mine, like the Adani plant. Like, Labor supported it, but a lot of people didn't really believe them because of how close they were getting to the Greens.
Yes.
It's the same kind of thing here. They're not really sure if Labor can be trusted in that regard. So I guess that's why this independent Conservative thinks maybe he's got a chance. He'll look like the authentic Conservative that really is looking out for local jobs. Okay, so the United Australia Party, they will not appear on your ballot paper for the 2025 election.
They are finally gone.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, they might come back. That's possible. But in this election cycle, impossible. This went all the way to the High Court.
You've been exercised.
Clive Farmer took this all the way to the High Court. And remember, there's nothing higher than that, so this is final. And that was to have them re-registered in time for the election. Now, the reason this decision was made is because the UAP was actually voluntarily deregistered after the last federal election cycle. I remember we covered this at the time. Now, electoral laws state that if you deregister a party during an election cycle, you cannot re-register a party during that same election cycle. And, you know, the letter of the law there is actually quite clear. And it was just upheld in every decision. So, yeah, Clive Palmer can do nothing about it now. And God knows how much money he spent on that, going all the way to the High Court. to fight for a party that won't even win a bloody Senate seat.
Okay. Fucking Christ.
And that's why I think we can say with certainty now, Ralph Babette, and I know some people kind of like him because he was one of the few senators who went against the hate speech laws. But there was confusion as to whether or not he was an independent candidate or a UAP candidate. Well, he's an independent candidate. On paper, anyway, he is, because the UAP is not a registered party. Okay. So, the WA election. I just saw an article that sort of reminded me the other day. I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. Our opposition leader, our official opposition leader in WA is not Libby Mettam. It's Shane Love. He's the leader of the National Party. So if you followed the last election where the coalition were just fucking wiped out, the Liberals were left with, I believe, 2 seats, and the Nationals had 4. So the Nationals had a greater number in the lower house. So therefore, they were the ones recognised as the opposition, in coalition with the Libs, of course. Now, the way it works, even though Libby Mettam is not the actual opposition leader, the agreement is to install her as Premier should they win the next election. Spoiler alert, they won't. What will happen is they will gain back a lot of their seats. They're bound to, considering they lost the seat of Churchlands, even, which is just doesn't get more blue ribbon than that. And then what they'll do is they will elect Basil Zemplis as leader of the party. And then good chance he will win the election in 2029. All right. Kind of already covered that stuff on the Greens. Let's go to the Federal Labor Party. Now, we don't often do, waste of funds stories, but this one I think is particularly good. So Bill Shorten hired a speechwriter on a 2-year contract to be paid $600,000, so $300,000 per year. And that's more than what, even the Safety Commissioner gets. So this was to be a speechwriter for Bill Shorten in his capacity as NDIS Minister. Now, apparently the going rate for a speechwriter, the average is $140,000. That I thought was kind of steep. But apparently, there was a shortage. There wasn't enough people applying for the job, so they had to hunt this person down and offer them an inflated amount. But where this gets even more ridiculous is that Bill Shorten is out of politics now. He took on a plum role at the University of Canberra, and this speechwriter has followed him there. So she's not even writing speeches on behalf of Services Australia anymore. This is just, she's I don't know, Bill Shorten's personal assistant or something. So this is really weird. And so it effectively means she gets paid an extra $300,000 to go work for Bill Shorten while he's at the University of Canberra. Very bizarre.
To be honest, I would want an extra $300,000 to work with Bill Shorten.
Yeah, you might. Maybe that's why they found it so difficult.
Shorten stature, shorten name, and shorten temper.
All right. So a story from WA Labor. Now, please forgive me. I sort of found this funny. I shouldn't. But I think we covered this at the time. There was a former Labor MP called Barry Urban. He was elected in the last election, and during in his like very first year in Parliament, it was revealed that he had basically lied about everything on his resume. He had fake university degrees, and he had a fake military record. And how he was actually sprung was he used to wear a military medal into Parliament, and like someone noticed it, and they're like, "Hey, he didn't earn that." Like, and then they looked into his background, and it just like almost his entire resume was a fraud. So he was kicked out. He was made an independent. But anyway, he ended up leaving Parliament, and he went back to running a tire and auto, like a mechanics in Kelmscott.
What?
Kelmscott being one of our dodgy suburbs.
Yeah.
Anyway,
imagine there's a lot of cash handovers at that.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's dead now. What happened was, while he was working at that business he ran, he had an altercation with a 25-year-old customer from Seville Grove, which again is one of our dodgiest suburbs. It's directly adjacent to Armidale, which is our most notorious suburb. And so this guy actually king hit Barry Urban in the head that caused his head to hit the concrete below him and sustained serious head injuries. And he just died in hospital a couple of days ago. So shit. But even Roger Cook had to come out and say some nice things about him. Like he said, okay, he's got a bad record, but he's still a member of the Labor family, and we mourn his loss.
Mm.
But yeah, if you're gonna die of head injuries anywhere in WA, that's where you're gonna die of them.
Kelmscott, yeah.
Well, that general area.
There's a. I don't fucking get how Mandurah has like the most like fucking precursors of methamphetamine in like the wastewater when there's places like Armidale, Rockingham, and yes, Kelmscott.
That might be because, you see, Mandurah can be very misleading if you only go to the coast. You've got to go a bit more inland. Do that, and then you start to see the other side of Mandurah. So you might just be looking at all those rich retirees, who live near the river. Mandurah, like some areas of Mandurah look beautiful, and others are just dumps.
Oh boy.
All right, well, salmon farming. Already kind of mentioned this, but Albanese has just written like an open letter to the salmon industry guaranteeing that they will have a future for salmon farming in Tasmania. Not everyone is convinced, though. All right. Okay, now I don't like this at all. So back in WA, our health minister says that a Labor government would enable GPs, your general practitioner, your local doctor, to both diagnose and prescribe treatment for ADHD. Now, what credentials would these GPs have to be able to do that? 13 hours of online training. That's it. Now, you're talking about like what is a serious mental disorder that, you should not diagnose lightly. If you ask me, it was already too easy to get the diagnosis. I think the way it is at the moment is you can be diagnosed by a GP, but then you have to get prescribed the medication by a psychiatrist.
Yeah, look.
Or it might be the other way around.
Understanding how the referral system works and, how it's written in black and white and also how it actually, acts in person. Most psychiatrists in this country are super fucking lax. They'll take anything a fucking GP writes on a script or a referral verbatim. They actually, in most recent years, post-lockdown, psychiatrists have stopped seeing themselves as some like privileged field between psychology and medicine and started seeing themselves as, well, being abused for their time because of the increasing mental health problems that can't be really treated properly with therapy, or at least the DSM-5 says can't be treated with therapy. And also, the DSM-5, Yeah, the DSM-5 has moved all from 4 actually had way more therapy options, way more standard psychology options than the DSM-5 does. The DSM-5 is a fucking pharmacology propaganda book, and psychiatrists have been suffering since. They don't want to deal with anyone right now.
Well, I mean, I think psychiatrists have increasingly become glorified drug dealers in a lot of way.
Yes,
They're just
that's
the
been the
specialists.
case. That's been the case for a long time. But now it's in a book. Now it's in something you can look at. It's not some fucking dude on a college campus making some weird judgment, or some homeless person talking about how nothing works here. Now it's in black and white. That they're being directly prescribed. They're being directly told by the institutions to overprescribe.
So look, the reasoning behind this, I understand it, and that's the fact that psychiatrists are very expensive. So, that means a lot of parents would have to pay these huge fees to get the diagnosis or to get the prescription, whatever it might be. So this is simply an attempt to make it a bit cheaper and easier. All right, I get that logic, but can't we instead have, say, publicly funded psychiatrists instead? I mean, I know we have some, but obviously there's the issue here is access to psychiatrists who are charging way too much bloody money. I mean, isn't there any other way we could make that affordable? Because what I don't like about this is we're going to see yet another huge increase in the amount of kids being prescribed drugs that they shouldn't be on.
Look, we're going to deal with a new reality of what is children-like behavior when we invite, certain parts of certain subcontinents of certain, regions of the world where rape, brutalization, stabbings, and etc. are going to be commonplace if they're not heavily medicated with antipsychotics.
Yeah, and there's that too. I mean,
yes.
With the general breakdown of social fabric, we keep looking to secondary solutions, and we're like, we just need to put them on medication. Yes. Medication is the panacea.
Well, if everyone's on lithium, Finian, no one's on lithium. Yeah, that's again, audience, do not come here for good news.
No, don't. All right, last thing on health. Mark Butler, the health minister, says that surgical abortions performed in public hospitals remain a responsibility of the states and the territories. Now, the reason he's saying this is because there were calls from the Greens and others for the government to make abortion more accessible and affordable to women, because apparently the state and territory governments are not doing good enough in that regard. In this case, though, the federal government says no. We like what they're doing, and we want them to make it affordable and accessible, but we're just not going to fund it. Okay. So the NDIS. Apparently, more than $600 million of savings have been made. So that amount has been shaved off the projected budget figure for the NDIS. This was just announced by Amanda Rishworth. She is the minister who just took over from Bill Shorten. So they're saying that their target of reduced growth rate of 8% by of the financial year 26 to 27 is currently on track. They just have to kind of keep going the way they are. Now, at the same time, Amanda Rishworth is saying that there will be no tightening of which disabilities are eligible for the scheme. Now, this is what a lot of people were worried about when they first announced reform to the NDIS, that they were just going to simply take disabilities and just remove them altogether, meaning even if you were diagnosed with that disability, you would not be entitled to anything under the scheme. She said, no, look at this. We've been able to make these savings without doing that. So there's no plans of actually doing that. Now, at the same time, though, the country's disability peak disability body. I'm sorry, I don't have the name of it here, but they've said that, like, okay, while that's true that they haven't removed any disabilities from the scheme, there still has been a huge number of people who've been kicked off the scheme because they no longer comply with, whatever the criteria is. So, yeah, they still did kind of tighten the criteria, and they did make it harder for you to be eligible to get on the scheme. Now, when all of these plans were in discussion, there was a general understanding that what the NDIS could not fund would be made up for by the states and the territories funding it instead. In other words, the states and territories actually putting more funding into disability care. Well, the disability lobby says that's not happening. They said despite all of these people getting kicked off, and it says that was actually in the past year, that's up to 12,000 people because they were told that they needed to have their eligibility reassessed. They've said that ever since then, these people have not been able to receive state support. So yeah, they might actually be leaving some people behind as a result.
That's all good. Okay. It's right and proper for the first people to suffer, to be them.
Okay.
None of this shit's gonna work. Trust me, buddy. We're all gonna fucking be dancing by the end of this.
All right. Well, on education, it's actually been 1 year now since the ban of smartphones in public schools. Now, for the most part, or maybe just for the entire part, the evidence is anecdotal, but it does look like it has been a success. Teachers have generally said that classes are easier to manage now. They don't have such an issue with bullying that can take place on social media, and also kids are just having less screen time. They're going out, playing sport, playing music, whatever it is, and not have to be glued to a screen all the time. There hasn't been a year since vaping bans also came into effect, but apparently they're a success as well. Yeah, that should have come in a long time ago.
Oh, there we go. It turns out like basic authoritarian adjustments to children actually curb their delinquent behavior. It's not like every culture throughout time has fucking learned this and known this. And it's only in the last, 40 odd years since the hippie movement that this has been in contention? I guess it needs to be 60 now, doesn't it? 60 odd years.
Yeah. Okay. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics new data shows that enrolments for private schools are at record highs. And this is for the 5th year in a row. And simultaneously, public schools are losing students or they're only experiencing a small rate of growth. Yeah, no surprises there. For one thing, there is the growing divide between rich and poor. I'm not really saying that from like a socialist point of view. It's just that we're importing third world people, and that's a much better way of actually increasing that divide. But it's also because schools are becoming increasingly non-white. When white people start to become a minority or close to being a minority, they are targeted because of their race. They are bullied. They are beaten up by non-white students. Not many teachers or even the parents would like to acknowledge that. The hell is that noise?
Birds?
I think there's birds like right outside my fucking window. It's really distracting.
You do have a nice place. I wouldn't blame them for showing up, Consider it a compliment.
Yeah, it's just very hard to concentrate with this fucking journey. But yeah, look, I've done this rant before. Short story is schools becoming non-white. What do? You pull your kids out and you spend the money that you have to send them to a white private school and to get a decent education as well.
Yep.
So no surprise there. Okay, well, here's a disappointing story. I was really hoping. See, at the ABC, there's a lot of people
That's your
hate
problem.
the
You're
ABC.
hoping.
Well, I'll explain. My most hated person at the ABC is Louise Milligan.
Yep.
She's this wretched cat lady. She's basically the one responsible for sending George Pell to jail.
Yep.
She basically published stories about him that were completely untrue.
She is a cunt.
And that was used in evidence to convict him twice in Victorian courts for crimes that he clearly didn't commit. But anyway, that's another story. Well, it's still related, though, because what she did was she wrote an article. More than one article, again about George Pell. This was after he died, and it was about, his child sex abuse allegations that were made against him. They're all bullshit. But it also referenced the child sexual abuse redress scheme. Now, I think we covered last week, maybe the week before, that redress scheme did end up making a compensation payout to people who were clearly not abused by George Pell. But anyway, I can't actually give you many details on what these articles said because it's not printed in this article. Now, the reason why is because it was actually protected information. And this isn't like with WikiLeaks, where when military information is leaked, it then becomes public, and then it's not a crime to actually distribute that information because once it's leaked, it's public. This is actually this is information that remains confidential, even if it does leak. In other words, you're still not allowed to publish it, even if there has been a leak. So there obviously was a leak, otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to get her hands on it. She published it in the ABC and in the Monthly. And I don't know, maybe it contained information about suspected victims. I'm not sure. But this was actually pointed out. The Australian newspaper pointed out that this material had been illegally published. And the ABC actually kept the articles up for 6 days. Now, there were then calls, of course, for Louise Milligan to be prosecuted for that. And guess what? No. She's not. Even though she blatantly broke the law here. This bitch just seems to just get away with everything. Okay. Last story. I also posted this one on the socials. This one kind of amused me. Queensland is about to get its first Chinese Cultural and Heritage Centre.
Yay!
It's going to be built in Cairns with state government funds. This is coming, remember, from a Liberal national government. What are you laughing at?
Cairns. It's going to be built in Cairns, of all places.
Well, yeah. Are there many Chinese people there?
I don't think. Probably probably in the 4 digits, 5 digits. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I would have assumed it would be in Brisbane if they were going to build one in Queensland. But
honestly,
anyway.
I think I want a Chinese museum in Perth, but only of one period of Chinese history, which is when that dude claimed to be the brother of Jesus Christ, and apparently 20 million people were cannibalized.
All right. Well, this project is going to cost $2.7 million. Why? What the fuck do they need that for? But anyway, this has proved controversial. Why is that? Well, because in the same area of Cairns, you don't have a First Nations Cultural and Heritage Centre. Now, you see, what happens here? You announce funding for one ethnic group, and then another ethnic group says, wait, what about us?
Yeah.
And of course, Aborigines will always claim that, they should have the most privileged because they were here first or whatever. But I mean, look, it would just be anyone. This is ethnic politics. These are ethnic groups playing power games to get a
It's the
piece of the
future of
pie.
our country, unfortunately.
This is what happens when you import lots and lots of ethnic groups and they start operating as voting blocks and financial blocks. This is what they do. But also, another thing I sort of found amusing here was obviously this was celebrating the Chinese in Australia, and they're pointing out that there is a long, rich history of Chinese Australians dating back all the way to the gold rush. Oh, wait, so this is why they've chosen Cairns.
Oh, God, because...
Yes, it says
and
about
I was say a racial slur.
one third of the population of Cairns during the gold rush were Chinese.
And why did it suddenly reduce a whole bunch? Was there some kind of deep concern? Was there some kind of end to a mercantile trade? Well, will we stop being held hostage when the Royal Marines showed up?
You know, because of this, there's a book called White or Yellow. It's written by William Lane, and it's about a race war occurring in Queensland because of like the Chinese taking over. And as the plot goes in the book, you might have imagined it's about the white people rising up and defeating the Chinese in Queensland. It's a real book. Look it up.
Well, the people from Queensland, they tend to be, yes, again, very animated.
They do. All right, guys. That is where we'll leave it. We're a little under time, or, going by our recent averages anyway. But that was episode 237. Check us out at theracer.biz, and if you're feeling generous, you can go to theracer.biz/donate, and you can donate Bitcoin there. And we should see you same time next week.